Ohio State faces Iowa in its second Big Ten game of the season, fifth game overall. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan, Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. And these are our game picks. But first, some stats on the season on how we're doing at predicting these games. Obviously, we're all 4-0 with Ohio State picking them to win. I am 3-1 against the spread. Stefan and Andrew are both 2-2 versus the spread. Against the over-under, I'm 1-2-1. Stefan and Andrew both 2-1-1. They're just connected at the hip at this point. And how we're doing these things. We use our Buckeye Talk tokens coming into this game. We started with 100 on the year. I now have 108. Stefan has 110 to lead the way, and Andrew down to 105. So all of us right now have made some money from Vegas. That's how we've done some things. Andrew's trying to see in his head where he lost money. You lost Buckeye tokens last week. You lost them last week. You bet big. You didn't lose big, but you bet big. Ohio State facing Iowa this weekend. Let's see if we can continue this winning streak. Ohio State a minus 19 favorite, and the over-under is 44.5. Andrew, I'll let you go first. What's your game score?
Ohio State 38, Iowa 6. I think we're going to have Iowa held off the scoreboard in terms of touchdowns, but I do think they're going to get some kind of a run game going. I think they're going to kick some field goals. I think this is going to be pretty basic. I think it's going to be kind of what we saw from the previous couple of weeks with Ohio State, where there's a couple drives where you look at it and go, ooh, I don't know about that. Like that, what was that? Iowa just went, 11 plays and 65 yards, and they kicked a field goal, and it took 7 minutes off the clock. What's going on with this run defense? I think there might be one or two of those in this game, but I do think Ohio State shouldn't really have a ton to worry about with Iowa offensively. I mean, in the previous part of this pod, for those that have been listening all the way, but for those that are just picking it up on YouTube, I'm not worried about Iowa's passing attack, and nor should anybody be. They haven't thrown a touchdown pass against an FBS opponent this year. They're just not all that good throwing the ball, and that's going to be a really big problem for them. So if you had maybe a little bit more of a passing attack, I think this is a game. But when you have a defense as good as Ohio State's defense is, I think that you can just kind of crowd the box and make this, a pretty one-dimensional offense, and that one dimension might not be able to do very much. So Ohio State, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win pretty handily, and I think it's going to be a nice little segue going into that Oregon game where if you think Iowa is one type of offense, you are going on the complete opposite spectrum when you play Oregon in a couple of weeks or in a week.
So essentially, he picked the Michigan State score, except turned Iowa's touchdown into 2 field goals. I respect that. Stefan, another fun fact, and this is the first fun fact if you're watching on YouTube. It's another fun fact if you're listening to it on the podcast. We actually would have predicted the score right if we would have taken a field goal away from Ohio State and Michigan State last week. We both said 41-10, and it ended up being 38-7, which is why we picked the over, and it ended up being the under, and we lost some points, but that's life. I'm going to go next. Ohio State 41, Iowa 9. It's the same premise as what Andrew is talking about. I don't think Iowa gets in the end zone, but I do think they get a couple of field goals on the board because they're able to gash Ohio State a little bit in the run game early on. I think this game is going to play out the same way the last 2 games played out, and I don't think it's a problem at all. I just think they're playing quality football teams with good game plans, and they're able to move the ball a little bit because Ohio State's just not going to shut everything down at all times. Now, can they adjust quicker? For sure. And can they do some things that maybe it didn't work the last couple of weeks and they can improve on it this week? For 100%. One of those improvements might just be Tyreek Williams is on the football field, right? Another one of those improvements is stop taking Jordan Hancock off of the football field. But Iowa's a quality run offense. Andrew's right. They can't throw the ball. They're amongst one of the worst passing offenses in the country. But running the ball, they're one of the best run teams in the country, which is an interesting place to be for a team who is not a passing threat. For them to still be top 15 in the country and running the ball, that says something about how good their run game is. And I think they just might gash Ohio State just a little bit. And I don't think it's an indictment on Ohio State. I think it's a compliment to Ohio. Iowa has gone from incompetent, laughable, disrespectful on offense to just being competent. And when you pair that with a defense, you might get some things. So that's an over, and that's an Ohio State cover. Stefan, what's your game score?
Yeah, Stephen, I'll agree with you in the 9 points from Iowa. I have 34-9 as my final score, Ohio State winning. So that would give the Buckeyes a cover, would be barely getting the under there. I think that might be the first time I'm taking the under this year. Mm-hmm. I echo a lot of what you guys have said. I don't want to repeat too much, but Caleb Johnson's a dude on Iowa's offense, right? Like I think he's going to have some success running the ball, and this might be the first time where a team has some running success against Ohio State, and we don't necessarily freak out about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but when Marshall did it, everyone was like, "Whoa, wait, what's going on?" And Michigan State did it, you kind of had some concerns. Listen, the dude averages 170 rushing yards per game. If you hold him to 100 or less, I consider it a win, right? Like he's put up some really impressive numbers. He ran all over Minnesota, and I don't think Minnesota necessarily has a bad defense. So he's the vocal point of what you got to stop. But I think he's worth getting 3 scoring drives for Iowa, right? Like getting 3 field goals on the board. I think that's how good he is. But I don't really see Iowa doing much more besides that. I don't really see much of a explosive passing attack for them, or frankly, maybe even it might not be an explosive running attack as it might just be, a quantity, a lot of runs and picking up yards over the yards per carry might not be great is essentially what I'm trying to say. But I think Ohio State's offense will continue doing what it does. I think it'll be a little bit of more of a test in terms of what Ohio State's running game can do. But I think they'll still be able to do enough with guys like Jeremiah Smith and Mecca Buka downfield to open things up a little bit, to put some points on the board and be able to cover this one.
And for a guy averaging over 8 yards per carry, if you can get that down below 6, that says something.
Exactly.
Right, to your point. It's more about the yards per carry than it is the total yards. So if he carries it 30 times for 150 yards, I don't know if that's a good day. That just means you got the ball a lot. The other thing I was going to say, the other place I think this is coded is Ohio State scored 38 points in 3 quarters against Michigan State, and then they just completely took their foot off the gas, and the second and third teamers couldn't score. I'm also banking in, if that happens again, well, either Ohio State's going to have 41 points in 3 quarters, or when they're running their offense with Devin Brown or Julian Sand out there, if we see that similar situation, the second teamers are able to find the end zone or at least get some points on the board up as well, which didn't happen against Michigan State. But those are our game picks. We've got 3 covers, 2 unders, 1 over. Get the text 614-350-3315. And if you're listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, looking at our beautiful faces, go find Buckeye Talk wherever you've listened to podcasts and get the text, like I said, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. Ohio State, Iowa on CBS at 3:30 on Saturday. We'll be back after this break.